Hey friends, welcome to Embracing Your Season. I'm your host, Paige Klingenfield. Thank you so much for joining me today. I want to hear from you. Friends, I want to hear what guests you want on the show. I want to hear what topics you need to listen to and gain wisdom from. I would just love to connect with you. So please hit me up at my email at pageklingenpeel@gmail.com. Before I get into our amazing guest today, I want to check in with Mike Segovia, my amazing producer. Mike, how are you today?
Paige, I'm doing good. I'm getting ready for a cold spell. I feel like we always talk about the cold, but
Dude, it's winter. Exactly.
well, and being here in Colorado, as our guest is as well,
Mhm.
it is coming. It's single digits this weekend.
Oh, yes. Have
So
you
I,
ever been, like, so cold that, like, your face, like, freezes, like, the nose hair just won't even work anymore?
oh
Like,
yeah,
it's ridiculous.
I'm just breaking those nerves here off as I'm walking, and I'm just chucking them all over
Oh,
the place.
man. Nice. That's the listeners love the details.
Oh, absolutely. But that being said, my wife didn't get me some nice Christmas fuzzy like sock slipper things. Now the problem is I never want to take them off. So if I have to go take out the trash,
Yeah.
I can't put them on it. So I got to take them off, put other socks on, and it's a real thing, Paige. So, anyways, I
It's a
never.
problem. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a problem. So, I never want to take them off. So that's what's going on in my life, Paige. Cold
Yeah.
and fuzzy slippers, socks.
Oh, that's fabulous. Sounds like a good time. Well,
Absolutely.
speaking of spouses, I have a pretty funny story from this week. So, my husband and I are blessed. We each have our own car, per
Uh
se.
huh.
And so, Ryan likes to drive. When we're together, I let him drive because I like it when he drives, especially in the snow. And so, I have like chapsticks everywhere. Like I have to have chapstick. And so I'm
Yeah.
like a squirrel. Like I plant them all over the house and in my
Nice.
car and just like everywhere, right? So he asked for one. I tell him it's in the middle console, whatever. And I'm looking out the window. And when I turn back, women, you know what I'm talking about when I say this. There are chapsticks that is tinted now. Like that's the technology level that we have in this world. So he had accidentally grabbed one of my tinted, like bright red tint chapstick and placed that thing all over his face. Now, friends, as you know, I have a choice in this moment because he is ignorant of this fact. I have a choice. Do I let him go out in the world and face the world with bright red lipstick? Or do I love him well and tell him that he has it? I mean, it was a really daunting decision. I don't think I took it lightly. I might have said a prayer and asked the Holy Spirit to discern because I was loving life in that moment, just seeing him in that. So I did end up telling him. And of course, he's super grateful that I love him enough to share that. But like that stuff happens all the time in marriage, doesn't it? It's
It
like those
does.
moments where it's like, how can we love our spouse well when they make mistakes or when they do goofy things? And it's like, it almost just helps us remind one another that we're just not perfect. I mean, my
We're
husband knows I'm perfect, obviously,
Oh,
but
of course, yes.
I mean, he messes up more than I do. But I was really glad for him in that moment that he had a wife that told him. Is that the angle I
Um,
should go with? That
I
he's
think
he's
so,
lucky?
but my gosh, man, that would have been hilarious.
I
I
know.
know, you did the right thing.
I know.
Oh my
Thank
gosh, that's
you.
great
Thank you
though.
for the affirmation.
That is
Yes.
awesome. Now, Paige, I know you're totally excited about our guest today,
Yes.
and why don't you tell us all about him?
So, what is so cool about one of the things that we do at the church that I work at is we emphasize church planning. And we're not taking our church and we are transplanting it in other locations. We are saying that each individual is called by God to go and bring the gospel to the world. And if that means that they go to a different city, go to a different state, we want to make sure that happens and we provide financially and through prayers. And we even send people in that way. And so the guest that we have on the show today, he was one of our church plants. And it's so
Mm,
cool to hear his story because the Lord has just blessed his church. It is growing. I'll let him talk to you a little bit more about that. But his name is Nirup Alphonse. And so a little bit about him is that he is the lead pastor of LifeGate in Denver. So out
mm,
in Colorado, where you're at, which is
yeah.
great. But what's so fun about his story is he's originally from Singapore, which is, I'm sure he has tons of great stories He relocated to Chicago, where he finished high school and then ended up getting a degree from Trinity International University. And then he's been in ministry for 2 decades. I mean, just phenomenal things that you've just seen the Lord bless him in all of those things. And he is now a sought after speaker. He comes to our church still annually and he preaches during either marriage conference, which if he hasn't been told yet, we've invited him to the marriage conference this year in 2025. So that's the insight. Hopefully he's aware of now the invites there. But he's a powerful speaker. I know you guys will love him. He's charismatic. He loves the Lord. He loves his wife and he loves his kids. And it's going to be a powerful conversation today.
Well, that's awesome. Well, say no more. Everyone's excited about hearing this, so let's get to it. Let's get to the interview now on this edition of Embracing Your Season.
Nirup, I'm so pumped that you're here having this conversation with me. Thanks for making time for us today.
Oh, thank you. It's been I've just been listening to the intro. I can't believe your husband put on lipstick. It's so funny.
I know. I mean, to clarify, it was chapstick, but I mean, he still lost his man card, right? Like,
Yeah, I
you
mean,
just
I
can't
just
do
feel like
that.
you could tell a texture difference, or at least the smell. Like you're like, this
Yeah,
smells different, I don't know.
I
To each his
know.
own.
I
To each his
know.
own. Listen, I'm not gonna judge.
Right. Maybe he was trying something out and we just had an
Yeah.
experiment. It didn't work though. So now we have that clearly stated.
But you're a champ for telling him.
Oh, well, thank you. See, that's what I love. I love the affirmation because things could have gone very differently
Could
for
have gone
him.
south real fast.
Well, let's hear a little bit more about your family. Tell us about your wife and your kiddos.
So my wife graduated from Indiana Wesleyan, same as you, and then we got
Hmm.
married in 2007, and we dated. It was pretty fast dating. We met and dated, engaged, married in like 18 months. So
Wow.
when you know, you know. So like I always tell people, if you don't know after 6 weeks, it's not the one. So when you know, you know. So 18
There you
months, and
go.
then we got married. We were in ministry, and then just true story. How we got into parenting was my wife was working, but not career working, just sort of working. And I came home one day and I said, Hannah, you either have to get a real job or you have to have a baby. Just pick one. Like pick one of the two. And she
Wow.
and she said, I think I'm gonna have a baby. So then that's how we started. We got into parenting. So
Dang.
so the expenses were racking up right away. So now we have four boys, all boys. So our oldest is 13, eighth grade, preteen, which is just a fun, interesting season.
Mm. Hmm.
And then our youngest is 3. So it's just, and then in between is a fourth grader and a second grader. So it's all hands on deck. It's loud all the time.
Yeah.
Whoever says boys don't have emotions have never been around 4 little kids. So plenty of feelings, plenty of emotions. We have a
Yeah.
membership to the local children's hospital because once a week someone's getting stitches, someone's getting
That's so
something
true.
fixed. So yeah, just a full season of life. So full time parent, but I love it. I just think it's a great season. That someone told me early on in parenting that the days are long, but the years are fast,
Hmm.
and I never kind of understood that until now. Like you blink, and you like when did this kid turn 10? When did he turn 13? When did he turn 14? So it's
Yeah.
just that the days feel long and slow and hard, but the years are going real fast. So we're just in that whole
Mhm.
season. Get to lead a really great church, a lot of young staff, um, just really talented, quality people that love the Lord, and then just a really young church. The average age is like 25, so
Wow.
young church. I'm a pastor, but I feel like an older brother. I feel like a dad at times. Sometimes it's deep spiritual conversation. Sometimes it's let me help you learn how to balance your checkbook. So it's everything in
The
between.
life lessons. Yeah.
Life lessons. Like here's how you change a tire, and so it's all that,
Man.
but it's great. We love it.
Oh, that's so good. It's funny because I can totally relate to the whole hospital thing because I had my 2 girls prior to having my first boy, and we had never gone to the hospital. We had never had stitches or broken arms, and I'm telling you, by, like, age 2, we had already in the emergency room a couple times due to stitches, just silly nonsense playing and activities because boys just have a different level of impulse control and
Yeah,
lack of fear, and I mean, is that, like, a God ordained thing? I don't know, but that's a reality in my home.
it's got to be. I'm sure. I mean, of course, we have my niece and friends of ours who have daughters, but there's a different level of energy with boys.
Mhm.
They just have to get stuff out. But what I do realize though is after having and raising boys with my wife is boys need an outlet for both. They need an outlet for their aggression, but they also need an outlet for their tenderness and their creativity. It's both. It's
Mm.
not just the, go outside and, just hit each other. There is also an outlet for their tenderness as well, because they're creative, they're smart, they like making things. And so our kids will go outside and play. We play football, and then they come inside and then they cook, and then they go help my wife with the flowers in the garden. Then they go with me and they build or paint something. So it's both of those. It's not just one size fits all.
Yeah. Well, dig into that a little bit more because I feel like in our culture today that there really is a misunderstanding of what is appropriate for men to have the tender emotions. Like, how do you build that into your kiddos and telling them that it's okay to have those things?
Yeah, it's really good. I think there's probably a generation of men who were raised to suppress their emotions and sort of
Right.
live with a sense of duty. Go get this. I watch these TV shows like Band of Brothers and this new movie
Mhm.
Midway. All World War II soldiers, and you just think, man, these guys are built different. They're just built different. And maybe the world, you could contend, needed that type of man at the time to stand up and to be defiant against evil, but have the sense of duty and a strong sense of duty. But they're still human beings, and we're integrated. And so teaching our sons and our daughters, like, listen, you're an integrated human being. And so you have a body that's developing, you have a mind that's developing, you have a heart that's developing, you have a soul that's developing, and you have emotions. And so I think the toughest thing with boys that I'm learning, that my wife and I are learning, is you want to create the space for emotions to be had and for emotions to be shared, but you can't create the environment where the emotions take over. And now we're making decisions based off of emotions. Or I say, hey, you can express to me your frustration, or you can express to me that you're mad or you're upset at me. I'm not going to change my mind. The consequence won't change, but you should feel free to express what you're feeling. And so trying to create that, and then different boys are different. Our
Yeah.
oldest son, he's so I'll start with my 10-year-old. My 10-year-old has no problem telling you what he's feeling. No problem. He will wake up in the morning and he will tell you exactly what he's feeling. Right, wrong,
Dang.
good, bad,
Wow.
or the other. One of my jokes with him is, Eli, one of these days, you're 10 years old. One of these days, you're going to have a good day. I'm waiting for it. One of these days, you're going to have a great day. Like everything is always, and it just goes from whatever it is to the worst possible scenario in all of humanity. So he had no problem. You know what he's feeling. He wears it. Our oldest son, very creative, very smart, very empathetic, very compassionate, but has a hard time, like his mom, sharing what he feels or sharing a confrontation. But he's very creative. So sometimes I'll say, well, why don't you just draw me what you're feeling? Draw an image and just tell me what you're feeling. And so he'll come back with a little drawing he's done. He's like, this is me and this is what I'm feeling. And that sort of helps unpack what he's feeling. Our 8-year-old, you have to sit and sit and sit and pry for days to get out what he's feeling. I mean, days. It is so reserved. It's so held in. But he's the some of the most strong-willed. He's the fighter. He's the protector. He celebrates other people. So they're all different. And then the 3-year-old, he's just the happiest human who's ever lived. He's God's grace on us. He's the happiest, smiles all the time. He's a little sneaky. He's getting a little sneaky, but you have to create the space in your home for
Mhm.
conversations to be had. But telling our kids, you can have emotions, they just can't have you. You're
Mm.
free to express them, but it doesn't mean that everybody in the whole house has to now change and shift and move because you're having an emotion. You have to be able to keep moving forward. So yeah, I get it. You have an emotion, keep moving forward, keep pressing forward, because the day is still moving. There's still things to get done. There's still places to be. There's still like someone you're becoming. So I think that's what's a little bit different. There's a younger generation that's now become enslaved to their emotions. So they can't
Yes.
they can't move beyond what they're feeling in that given moment. And you're saying, hey, you can feel that, but you still have a job. Go to work.
Mhm.
You still have to go to class. Go to class. You still have to pay your
Mhm.
bills. Pay your bills. You still have responsibilities. And so trying to say again, what I said is, you can have it. You can have emotions. They just can't have you. And your emotions it's a true experience, but it's not a true reality. And helping our sons understand what's fundamentally true in their reality, and to be anchored in truth, because our feelings are always changing. And so we don't want to build a life on fleeting emotions, no matter how real they
Mhm.
feel. truth is what's true. And so we're trying to do that slowly, and it's hard. It's really hard because I never grew up with anyone asking me how I felt. I mean, to this
Wow.
day, I'm a grown man with 4 kids. I have never had my parents say, "How do you feel?" Never. And that's part of Asian culture. It's part of generational culture. My parents have never asked me, "How do you feel about this? Are you sad? Are you happy? Are you lonely?" Never. So my default is not to ask those things. So it's really my wife who helps me a lot help these boys have conversations and learning how to be a dad who's there in present with those conversations and emotions. Because left to myself, I would just, hey, bury it, move on to the next thing. So it helps having a wife that's way more aware of what's
Hmm.
happening in our home than I.
Well, and I'm sure that, I mean, even by your description of how you sit with each of your kids who have been made differently, who receive your love differently, like you've had to sit with them to figure that out. Was there any game plan in that, or was that just intuitive for you? Or Hannah told you what to do?
That's usually true. Yes. I think it's learning when it's so odd. You have these children and you're like they come from the same parents. They
Hmm.
live in the same house. I mean, the genetic makeup is only coming from this side and this side. And then
Hmm.
you realize they are just so vastly different. They approach the world differently. They're sensitive to different things. And so you just have to slow down and realize each child is unique and you're trying to bring out their uniqueness. So I have and it's really tough when you get this oldest kid, our firstborn, we're the best parents ever. I mean, this kid is so
I
easy.
know, right?
He's
Yeah.
so easy. Like, Lord, we wrote the book. We wrote the book on parenting. He's obedient. I mean, he has his moments where he's, forgetful or whatever, but he's not
Yeah.
defiant, he's not rebellious. And then we get the next two. Like, oh,
Yep.
okay. The Lord is like, I'm going to gently humble you in this.
Yes.
So you learn they're very different. What I've done or tried to do, I would say, is make intentional one-on-one time with all my
Mm.
sons. So all my sons, if I'm in town, for the most part, if I'm in town, each one of my kids gets a one-on-one, usually breakfast, like going somewhere for breakfast or coffee in the morning. And even then, you can tell their differences. The one kid just wants the cheapest meal possible. The other kid's like, "Can we go to sushi?" I'm like, "No, I'm taking you to sushi in the morning." But it's
Nice.
all those environments that help build and shape conversations. And even when it
Sure.
comes to discipleship, they approach things differently. So my oldest son is more what you could call kind of modern traditional discipleship. He can sit down over coffee, can go through a book together, can answer questions. Because he loves writing and he loves reading. But my next two are not like that. I couldn't do that. It's more of my 10-year-old, it's more of driving in the car. So when he says, "Dad, can I ride with you? I want to talk to you about something." Then I know that's a conversation he's been waiting to have for a long time. So I need to get him in the car. And then it's something from 2 weeks ago that I asked him
Mm.
that it's
Mhm.
finally coming. All the information's finally coming out. And then my youngest one, or my third one, we have conversations if we're doing something together. So we're building a Lego together, working on the car together. So you're trying to, part of being a parent, I realize, is you have to be a really good student of your children. You have to study them. And to be honest, Paige, you know this as well as I do, or any parent, like the devil does not know everything, but he is studying. I
Mhm.
love the screw tape letters. I love the screw tape letters. Read the screw tape letters as a
Yeah.
parent, as a
Mm.
father or a mother,
That's good.
and they're coming after our kids. So you realize, well, the devil is a student. So we have
Mm.
to be better students of our own children than the devil. We have to know their temptations. We have to know what pulls at them. We have to know what conversations to have. We have to know what temperament to lead them at. We have to know what pace we can move
Yeah.
with our kids. And it's very hard because our kids move at different paces. My middle two move as fast as I do. My oldest is the same pace as my wife. Like they take everything slowly. They move. They physically move at a slower pace. And
Yeah.
I'm at the airport with him, and I'm like, "You have got to move faster. Like you've got to move." And so it's learning that, and you're learning the whole time. No one taught us this. We had a little come to Jesus meeting dinner with our kids a few months ago, and we said, "Listen, you've never been 14, you've never been 10, you've never been 8, you've never been 3. We've never parented 14, 10. Like we've never done this. So we're gonna have to
Yeah.
all give each other a lot of grace and understanding." as we do this because none of us know what we're doing. So let's just try to figure this out together as a family. So that was, I don't know if I thought it was special. They probably just wanted to get to dessert or whatever, but I thought it was a groundbreaking moment, you know. But
Yeah. Well, I love that
well,
it's collaborative too, right? Like you are asking them to contribute to the way that you parent, contribute to the way that they allow you to know them in deep, intimate ways. I wonder, does that translate in the way that then you walk alongside them? You mentioned discipleship earlier. Is that part of that collaborative work as well?
yeah, so learning and understanding, hey, what do you want to do? Do you want to go to this? Do you want to study this? Do you want to go for a walk? Do you want to? So
Mm,
asking them questions about how they approach and just their personalities. And discipleship, they have to see you at home, really embodying what we say we believe. So there's an entire generation that grew up in the church, that went to Christian colleges like you and I did. That by the time they got to 35, 40, they have walked away from the Lord, they have walked away from the church. And so
yeah.
now I have a lot of parents who'll say, well, we don't want to bring our kids to church that much. We don't want to force church on them. We don't want to make them do these things. And my response is always, well, where else in life do you do that? Because you definitely make them go to basketball practice. You definitely
Yeah.
make them go to school. You make them do their homework. You make them brush their teeth. And I tell
Hmm.
them, listen, kids don't walk away from the Lord because they were forced to go to church. Kids walk away from our faith because when they come home, they see parents whose faith is incongruent with what they say they believe. Like, you say you
Wow.
believe this, but I've never heard you ask for forgiveness. I've never heard you say I'm sorry. You've never shared a struggle. You've
Mm.
never you've never showed me anything that's human other than you drag us to church. I've never seen you worship expressively. I see you celebrate sports, which is a good thing. Sports is a good thing, but I see you celebrate sports more than I see you celebrate Jesus. So, like, they see an incongruency, and especially this generation, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they crave, like, authenticity is the new currency for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if it's not authentic, and they don't care if you're authentically a jerk or authentically holy, just be authentic. And they crave that, and they sense it, and they have like a radar that can tell really fast, like, man, this person's fake. This is not real. And so they want to
Hmm.
see that in their parents. So it's like, hey, parents, if you want your kids to grow in prayer, they need to see it at church, but they need to see it at home. They need to see it with you. They need to be discipled by you. And the church is just partnering with you, not the other way around. So we take responsibility for our children. And I tell our church, listen, I will not have to stand before God and give an account for how you raise your kids, but you will, and I'm going to give account for my kids. And so they'll be here and they'll be discipled and they'll be poured into. And we also want to, as parents, surround our kids with other young men and women who love the Lord. Because I'm going to,
Yeah.
as you know, you have older teenagers. You've been saying
Hmm.
something for 10 years and they don't listen or they don't hear it. And then someone else
Hmm.
says something and they're like, Mom, this person's a genius. And you're like, I've
Yes.
been, I've been saying that since the day you were born, you know? So you need those
Yeah.
other people in your life, but you have to take responsibility and have
Mm.
agency in who your children are becoming. And really, that's what discipleship is helping shape who your children are becoming, not what they're doing. And so a lot of my questions to my sons are things about becoming. It's who are you becoming? So a story that I tell is one of my sons came home one day, or my wife texted me and she said, "Hey, one of your sons," which is always my son when something happens.
Isn't it? Yes.
One of
Yes.
your sons said a bad word at school. And so I came home and I'm like, okay. I was like, well, when I was growing up, my parents would have washed my mouth out with soap, would have done something. So I came home and I just asked him, like, hey, what word did you say? And what was the context? So he told me the word, he told me the story. And so I was like, hey, let's play a little game. I'm gonna make the sound of different animals, and then you tell me what animal makes that sound. So we went, quack quack, moo, and he tells me the animal, and I said, how do you know what animal that was? And he said, well, by the sound it makes. And I said, exactly. In the same way, people can tell who you are by the words that come out of your mouth. Now you tell
Dang,
me.
that's good.
So you tell me, do you want to become the kind of person who speaks this way? Because I can't control what you say when you go to school. But if that's who you want to become, you're on a great pathway to become that person. But if you want to become someone else, I can help you become who God has called you to be. But you have to tell me. You have to tell me who God has called you to be. So that's what it's tough. Like, it's really hard especially when your kid does something, because like when your kid lies
Mhm.
and they think they're smart. Like that's the funny thing about kids. They think they're smarter than you.
I
Like,
know.
and you're like,
Yeah.
we're like, you do know we're way smarter than you. Like you do know we know more than you.
Yeah.
Your kid lies, and your instinct is to say, you're a liar. Don't lie.
Mm.
Lying is bad.
Mhm.
And all those are true for sure. But what you're trying to do in that moment is not condemn them for what they've done, but bring them into who you believe they are. So instead of
Mm.
saying, you're a liar, why would you do that? Don't be such a little liar. Instead, it's, hey, Eli, you're a man of truth. You always speak the truth. No matter what the consequences, no matter what you face, you always do the right thing because you're
Mm.
honest. So you're trying to speak into who they're becoming and love them into becoming. And I just think we're trying to do that. And it's so imperfect. It's so imperfect. Fortunately, in parenting, when one of you is losing your mind, the other
Mhm.
parent is usually sane. And they're looking at you like you just need to go for a walk. And then it'll be reversed the next day. So
Yes,
you're
yes, it
doing that.
does.
So you remember it's a partnership in parenting as you're doing that with your kids. But
Mm.
we are trying as parents, especially now that we've entered the teenage years and we have less oversight into who is around our children every second of the day. Our oldest son, we're trying to just love him into becoming who God has called him to be. And that's not a phrase that I came up with. Mr. Rogers, probably the greatest entertainer of all time, shy of Michael Jackson. He's winning this lifetime, I think it's the Emmys, a Lifetime Achievement Award. And he goes on stage, and I mean, this is his moment, right? In front of all of Hollywood, every celebrity. And he says, I want you to take 30 seconds and think about the people who've loved you into becoming. And it's silent for
Mm.
30 seconds. And it's just a powerful moment to think about how we have the opportunity to love others into becoming. And it doesn't mean our cultural context of loving right now, our cultural definition of loving is tolerance or let people do whatever they want or sort of
Yeah, good
blind
quality. Mhm.
acceptance. Love is seeking the highest good of someone else. And so whether it's discipline or reproof or rebuke or teaching, I want to help love you because I see the best in you. I want to seek the highest good for you. So we're trying to do that as parents by God's grace.
Mm, mhm. And it sounds so great when you say it like that, and it's one of those things we know we need to implement, but it's that practicality and that's application. So, can you give our listeners some ideas of, like, how that can be implemented in our day-to-day?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say the one thing you have to do as parents right now, especially today, is you have got to deconstruct the culture in real time. So there are kind of three fundamental lies in culture that our children are being formed in. This idea that I deserve to be happy. Everything I do is for my own happiness. I deserve it. Or I am my own God. I live for my own, I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, however I want. And I deserve my truth. My truth is what's true. And you have to be able to deconstruct those in real time. So when you see it, whether it's on a TV show or in a movie, and I'm walking in the bookstore a few months ago with my sons, and I'll pause on this one thing. You also need to affirm what is God-given truth inside of your kids as early as you possibly can. So as many times, like so my wife and I have conversations with our boys that they are boys. What does it mean to be a boy? Your anatomy is that of a boy. But we also find moments to just remind them in simple ways that they're boys. Like, man, you're such a kind boy. You're such a strong
Mm,
young man. You're such a gentle boy. You're becoming you're going to be such a godly man. So you're constantly affirming that gender because of what culture is doing right now in gender
yeah.
ideology. So you're always finding that. You're talking about marriage. Sometimes you sit down and say, "Hey, this is God's design for marriage." And other times you're saying, "Hey, like one day you're gonna think a girl is really cute," and the 9-year old's like, "No, I would never do that," and you're like, "No, one day you're
Right.
going to." And so you're just trying to affirm these things that are biblical truth. And so I'm walking into Barnes and Nobles a few months ago, and this is going into the kids section. Into the kids section at the height of my kids is a series of books that is boy meets boy, boy loves boy, boy marries boy. And so rather than pretend it's not there and take all the books and turn them around, I bring my sons to it and I say, what do you think they're trying to do? by putting this on your eye level. I'm not going to pretend it's not there. I'm going to bring them so they see it. I want them to see
Yeah.
it. What do you think they're doing? Why do you think they're doing that? Why do you think they want you? Why is it not in the adult section at my height? Why is it at your height? Because they're trying to condition you. I mean, what Barnes and Noble is doing is discipleship. They're conditioning
Mm,
our kids to have a framework and an ideology about life, a
yeah.
worldview about life. And so I want to attack it in real time. We're listening to a song on the radio, and this guy, he says, the definition of success is to do whatever my heart says. So I pause it and I ask my 13-year-old, hey, is that a good definition of success? He's like, yeah, I think so. Do whatever my heart says. I'm like, okay. Well, what if my heart says one day, like, I don't want to be married to your mom. Like, I'm not feeling it anymore. And I just want to do my own thing. And I don't want to be a dad. Like, but it's what my heart says. Is that good? He's like, well, oh, no, I don't think so. I'm like, so it's not a good definition of success. So we have to be able to engage that in real time and deconstruct the culture.
Yeah.
An
That's good.
entire generation is going to deconstruct their faith if we don't teach them how to deconstruct their culture. And so we have to deconstruct it
Mhm.
and then rebuild it back up in what's true over a long period of time. So think of ways of how do I do this in real time, because you're not right now in culture going to avoid these things. They are everywhere. It's in every show, it's in every song, it's in every TV show, it's in books, it's in magazines. You are going to see it. You are not going to escape it unless you decide to live, in some homestead in a bubble somewhere, and you know no internet and you make your own butter. Like, you're not going to avoid it. It's going to be seen. So you just can't. So many of our parents, they sort of tried to hide us from these
Mhm.
realities rather than, no, we're going
Mhm.
to engage it. We're going to tell you what we see. And so you've got to be able to engage that in real time.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a good point that our previous generation, so the origin family that we have, like they did the best that they could. But I love the point of, but I don't feel equipped to handle some of the things that we're experiencing now. And that's one of my goals for parenting is I want to fully equip my kids. So even just having that critical thinking of like, why does this commercial elicit this emotion? What is the objective? What does this song mean? I always go into like the real time stuff. Like, what does this song mean? It might embarrass my kids, but at the same time, why
Yeah.
are you listening to that if you're embarrassed that I'm listening it with you? Right.
Yeah.
So we're helping our kids understand they need to have critical thinking and reasoning because the world is around them trying to dictate what the values should be for them. And that's not the reality that we
Yeah.
want them to have in this world.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
don't, and we really don't want to shame them for curiosity.
Right. Yeah.
We
Good.
never want to shame our kids because they're curious. I have 4 young boys. They are curious about their
Hmm.
bodies. And rather than
Hmm.
saying, oh, no, we don't talk about that. Like, yeah, man, you're a growing boy and weird stuff is happening to your body, but let's talk about it. Let's actually, and sometimes you can make light of it, and then you can also talk about it in a way that's serious. But I tell my sons, like, you are going to have parts of your body moving. You're going to have parts of your body, like, I don't know what this is, when you see a young woman and you're growing in life. None of this is bad. The desire for sex is not bad. It's not a bad desire. You are a sexual being. And it's odd to think of our kids that way. It's really odd to think of our parents that way. But you are a sexual being, and there's dignity in that and there's beauty in that. And so how do you engage that conversation? If you're not having it, somebody else is. And so
That's right.
you want to get to that conversation first and then stay in that conversation longer than the world is.
Yeah. Yeah. So on that note, like as we continue to take on the authority that God has given us to raise our kids to know Jesus, like what are some other ways we could be pouring into them, whether it's resources or intentional conversation topics, like some other ideas that we could just start again implementing, maybe even today?
Yeah, so I would say I'm like a 90-year-old monk trapped in a 40-year-old's body. But there's something about the way that early Christians lived with a rhythm. And I think one of the challenges in parenting today is that we parent and we orient our lives with no rhythm. Now there is a
Hmm.
rhythm, but it's a chaotic rhythm. So every week looks different. Every day looks different. All our meals look different. So you want to be able to sit down in a family and say, what is the most important thing that we orient our lives around? And if we're Christians, their answer is we orient our lives around the Lord. And what does that mean? So we orient ourselves around. So for us as a family, and this is not because I work at a church. Even if I didn't work at a church, as followers of Jesus, we would say we orient our lives around the gathering of God's people. The first thing that goes on our calendar, even if it's a birthday week or an anniversary, whatever, the first thing that goes on the calendar is we are a part of the church. We don't just go to church, we belong to this community. We serve in this community. Our kids should be surprised if we don't go to church. So we
Mm.
orient our life
Yeah.
around the gathering of God's people. And I would include, this is a little bit more difficult if you work at a church, but if you don't, Sundays should be a part of your Sabbath rhythm. And say, okay, as a
Mhm.
Sabbath rhythm, we begin on Saturday at 5 p.m. and end Sunday at 5 p.m. because Sabbath is a 24-hour period. And we either begin with a feast. So we feast, we invite friends over, we sit at the table, we light a candle, we pray, we break bread, and we enjoy each other's presence in the presence of the Lord. So we tell our kids, Sabbath, this is what we do. We remind ourselves that we are created by God, for, and we enjoy his presence. And so we gather. So you can either start your Sabbath with a feast, be a part of the church, or you end your Sabbath with a feast. So things like that, family time in the scriptures should be on your schedule. And those should be
Mhm.
more important. Parents, I'm telling you, this should be more important than your kids' soccer practice and your kids' basketball games. And it's so odd. We're willing to take our kids for years to do two-a-days, to go play sports or go do musicals or do whatever. And those are all good things. Don't get me wrong. But the reality is, a very, very, very small percentage of our children are going to participate in those as adults or be
Yeah.
professionals at it. But they're 100% going to have to stand before God. And even if that was a long period of time and they weren't standing before God for a long period of time, they are missing out on the enjoyment of walking with Jesus. Like, I love walking with Jesus. I want my kids to enjoy their walk with Jesus. So orienting your life around rhythms. So put a rhythm in your life, a rhythm for, we pray together, we go to church together, we serve together, we eat together, we go for a family walk together. We're in the scriptures together. So if it's not on your calendar, it's not happening. It's not going to happen. So look at your life and take an assessment of your family and say, if we were to assess this, if someone else were to assess this, what could they tell us is the rhythm of our family? Like, who is our
Ooh,
life
yeah.
really oriented around? Is it oriented around my job, my career, my school, vacation, whatever? Or is it really oriented around walking with Jesus as a family? And just
Mhm.
remember, parents, you have a small window, and then these kids are out, like they're gone. And yes, you'll always be their parents, but that time of in the home together is a blink. And so we want to be able to work really hard and say we have a rhythm of how we run, like have a family. And my wife
Mm.
and I can tell, like we just had a conversation a few weeks ago, like, hey, our rhythm is off. We're doing too many things, all good things, all good things. This is what I realized. When you're young in faith, you're choosing between what's not good and what's good. The older you get in faith, you're choosing between good things.
Yeah.
You're
Oh,
choosing,
wow.
and so like none of these, like we're not saying, oh, hey, we're gonna go and do something terrible. Like, hey, he has
Mhm.
basketball, he has chess club, he has this, he has a musical, he has this, and our life is so pulled apart. And when we get off rhythm, we feel it in our bodies, we feel it in our conversations, we feel it emotionally, spiritually. And so we have to get back on rhythm. Like we have to get back to this rhythm of walking with the Lord together as a family. And then reminding your kids, parents, you have to remind your kids that your kids are connected to the family and their decisions affect the lives of other people. And we have to stop raising independent children. The goal is not to raise independent children. The goal is to raise humble
Mm.
children who see their role in the formation of others and take responsibility for their life, but also the responsibility of others. And so we want to be able to raise kids and say, hey, man, when you make a decision like that, it's affecting your brothers. It's affecting all of us. And so you have to think deeply about how the way you're acting or what you're saying is hurting and affecting other people. And most Americans just don't parent that way. They
Yeah.
parent their
Well,
they parent their kids to
yeah.
be independent, and when their kids are independent, they're like, "Why don't you come home anymore?" Like, well, you raised them to be that, so you got the product you wanted. You can't complain about it now. So it's tough, but we want to raise them. This is a family unit, so you're part of a family.
Wow. Holy cow, you just blew up all the American ego syndrome, like, mindset, right? Because we are designed to be, well, just independent, as you indicated, that we were supposed to do things on our own. But the way that God made us is for community and
Yeah,
relationships. We're made in his image. And so it is so funny that you're right that we should gravitate towards relationships, but how does that translate in parenting? And I know my goal, I mean, literally, I have said this out loud. My goal is to make sure that my kids survive and that they are healthy adults. That equals in my mind independence. But as you're indicating, no, we need to make them interdependent.
Yeah.
They can survive on their own, but let's make sure that they recognize the power of relationships, which is God designed. Wow, what a great word, Nirup. Thank you for that. Well, I would love for people to get connected with you. So, where can they find your information and maybe find more about your church and how to connect with you?
Yeah, well, if you're ever in Denver, come visit. Don't visit this weekend because I think it's -7, which is rare. It's rare, by the way, people. It's hardly ever happens. But other than that, come visit us in Denver. The church is called LifeGate Denver. We'd love to have you, love to serve you, and just host you guys. It'd be so fun. And other than that, I'm usually on Instagram. LifeGate Denver is our church, and then Nirup Alphonse on Instagram. But would love having conversations about parenting. By no means are we experts. We're learning as we grow. So any advice you guys have, we would love to take it. So we're same season, same season.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much. And listeners, you could find all his information in our show notes as well. But Nirup, it was a pleasure. Thank you for all your time today. I appreciate you.
No, I appreciate it. Looking forward to hearing how this goes, and it's gonna go viral, and you're gonna be writing a book about this page. It's gonna be great.
Nice. Nice. Thank you. Well, friends, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Nirup. I know there was a portion at the end where I was like, oh my gosh, can we just have a 30-minute conversation about that when he was talking about the independence and just amazing things. And so I have so many more takeaways, but I would love to have my producers on so we can talk about the things that we learned from this and how we're going to use this and implement this in our own lives. So joining me now is Mike Segovia and Ariel Daves. Thanks for joining us, guys, to talk about some of your takeaways from this conversation with Nirup Alphonse.
Absolutely. That's what I call a quality conversation.
It
And,
was.
totally, and I know there's lots of nuggets there, but, one thing I got, Paige, and, I have 3 kids myself, and they're all grown and out, and we're empty nesters, but one thing that, he said that really struck me is that all kids are different. They all have
Mhm.
different personalities. They all react differently to different things. So,
Yeah.
when he said to have that one-on-one time with each one of them, that was awesome because I've always done that. I heard that from a wise old person back in the day, and I've always done that. I've always taken them out and had that one-on-one time so I can learn from each one of them, and they can learn from me. Because
Yeah.
in a setting of me and the three of them, it was different because they all respond differently. So for me, Paige, that was it. That one-on-one time because all the kids are different.
Yeah, I loved how you talked about being like a good student of your kids.
Mhm.
And again, with my 4 kids, like they are different, even in the way that I talk to them or have when I know there needs to be a conversation where we choose to locate for that conversation. Just even in loving them well, it's very different. And so that was such a good reminder. And how often is it that we don't orient our lives around that intentional relationship, which was one of my takeaways as well, as he talked about that rhythm of what are we orienting our family around. and
Mm,
and I could say
that's
that
good.
we're in a really busy season. We attempt to put Jesus first, but there are some times where certain weeks there are going to be other priorities. And so just as Nairib said, coming back to that conversation of saying we're out of rhythm, we need to reorient, and then talking about the reason why. And it's because we get filled up with the living water when we put Jesus first. We are nicer to each other. I mean, like they want me in the Word of God because when I am not in the Word of God or if I am not in prayer, like it's not all great. It's all fleshy up in here, Like there are definitely some irritabilities if I am not making personal time with the Lord, let alone on a family relationship. So that was one of my takeaways. Ariel, do you have one as well?
That's so good, Paige. I was thinking throughout this whole thing, he has such a well of wisdom,
Hmm.
and there were so many nuggets of gold that he said. And one of the things was put rhythm in your life, and I
Good.
can attest to this as like somebody who went through that process as a child and came out on the other end. My parents implemented a rhythm, and there was a point in our lives, just a real quick little story. There was a point in our lives when we were children, my brother and I, younger brother and I, and My parents sat us down and said, "Did you not think that this was wrong?" And we said, "No." And they said, "Did the Holy Spirit not tell you?"
Oh,
And we
man.
said,
Pulled out the Holy Spirit on
"No."
you.
Oh, yeah, they
No.
pulled it all like, all big guns, and
Yeah.
they said, "Why didn't you, like, automatically know that this was wrong?" And we just
Mm.
looked at each other like we just didn't know that this was wrong. My parents can't remember what it was to this day that we did, but the fact remained that something needed to change,
Mm.
and so they implemented family Bible studies every single morning before school. And at the time, we were homeschooled, so it was like, "Okay, 8 a.m., can't we just sleep in? No, we're gonna actually get up at 7 a.m. and make
Oh,
sure
wow.
that an hour before school, we're gonna get in the Word." And then we got into public school, private school, and they kept that routine, and boy, at the time, we threw our bodies around, we were like, "We don't wanna be here," like, can you not understand as kids, we don't like this. We
Yeah.
would fall asleep on him, he didn't care, he kept it consistent, and
Good
that
for
was the
him.
rhythm in our life that to this day, I look back and I go, "I don't know where I would be without those Bible studies."
Mm.
Like, that was so foundational for me and my brother to go, "We know the truth beyond a shadow of a doubt." My dad even asked, "Who in your friend group do you know where the parents will sit down with their kids and pour into them?" And we said, "Nobody. We don't know
Wow.
anyone whose parents will do that." So, just coming from experience, the rhythm in life was so impactful for me personally as a kid. So, that one really stood out to me, Paige.
Yeah. Oh gosh, what a testament too of like now in your season of life, like you have reverted back to what you planted even back then, and it's taken to the health of who you are today. So what a
Totally.
beautiful thing. I think another one that I really appreciated that he said is love our kids into becoming. Like that phraseology was very unique because he was talking about we're not pointing out the things that they're doing wrong and then giving them that identity piece of being a liar or a mistake or not intelligent in the decisions that they make, because let's be honest, kids make stupid decisions, but that is not their identity. Instead, we highlight the God-given identity that they are called to be a child of God, and therefore they do have a higher expectation over their behaviors. And so we're going to teach them that instead of exaggerating or lying, we're asking you to be a man of God that tells the truth. So it's like that flip in the way that we even address some of the decisions that they make. So we help them to become what they've all honestly been called by God to become. I just love how that changes the script for parents, just in the way that we just talk to our kids. I just think is a beautiful way that we can connect with them. And then obviously the deconstruct culture in real time. I am a huge advocate of this. I do this with my kids. It annoys them. I mean, I will stop the song that they are dancing to in the car and I'll be like, "What do you think that means?" Knowing what it means, but they'll be like, "Mom, come on, it's not that big of a deal. I'm just listening to it." But the reality is, you aren't just listening. You are planting those seeds that is becoming your truth, and that now becomes the filter for which you view decisions and choices around you. And that's not good stuff because, friends, the words that are being spoken over them, the seeds that are being spoken on them, are usually counter to what we need that God is telling us to live as his disciples and what brings us life. So it's really good to just take that moment and stop and not avoid it. I know that there are so many conversations I've had with parents where I say, "Yeah, I know your kiddo's in third grade, but if you aren't having this conversation, the people on the school bus are. If you don't have this conversation, the iPad that they've been given through the school system is going to unfortunately probably lead them to Google where they can answer that
Mm,
question
mm.
and then be discipled by the world." So have those conversations. Don't avoid it. Make sure you're orienting around the things that are prioritized. Make sure your rhythms are in place. And again, just loving your kids well by their unique design that God has made them. So, those are amazing takeaways, guys. Good work today.
Absolutely. It was a fantastic interview and just another great one in the lineup that we have on Embracing Your Season. So, guys, every Tuesday, man, we drop new episodes. So, you got to check them out. And if you missed anything, go back and listen to them again. Share them with your family and friends. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, we love it if you jump on there, give us a rate and a review. We love those 5 stars, and it really helps us to know how we're doing and all the guests that Paige gets and has on. She can kind of hear what you guys are saying and get more of what you want to hear. So really appreciate that. We love our listeners.
Awesome. I feel like you just close it out. That was a good close.
I think so, Paige. Why don't we say goodbye to everyone?
Awesome. We'll see you guys next week on another edition of Embracing Your Season.